y'all know me. I'm always looking for a more efficient way to get the best bang and return for my time, energy, and money. This episode, I swear this guest is my sister from another mister and all of that because she preaches a lot of what I have talked about on the 100 plus episodes of the Business Bites. Yes, I keep saying that in the intro because it's blowing my mind. But why am I bringing that up again here? Because I wouldn't have the time to sit here and do new episodes every week for you guys if I was not committed to quitting content creation. So dig into this episode. It is a good, quick bite of info, whether you're brick and mortar, location based, online, anybody, any entrepreneur. So please dig in and listen to it and also share with your entrepreneur friends.
Welcome to the Business Bites Podcast, the podcast for busy entrepreneurs. Whether you're an online entrepreneur or seeking after brick and mortar success, this podcast brings you quick bites of content so you can learn and grow anywhere you are. Now here's your host, Rachel Brainke.
This episode is sponsored by Big Picture CPA. Big Picture CPA does for accounting and tax what my brand, The Law Talk, does for photographers. It is a tax resource with accounting and tax tools, as well as services that photographers can go to get, well, help with accounting and tax. In fact, Andrew and his team are my CPA firm that I trust all of my brands with, and I think you guys should check them out as well. They do bookkeeping, tax returns, file sales tax, and quarterly tax estimates, and answer all of the questions that you may have regarding taxes. No matter how stupid you may think they are, they won't make you feel stupid, and they'll definitely give you guys the insider knowledge that you need to make sure that you're making the right tax decisions in your business. Be sure to check out the website at cpa4photographers.com and let them know that I sent you. Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 105 of the Business Bites podcast. I am your host, Rachel Brainke, every week. And this week I am joined with Haley Dale, and we are going to be talking about quitting content creation. You guys have heard me talk about repurposing of content, not creating new stuff when you're sitting on mountains of stuff. So Haley, I'm so excited for you to just come in as another voice and also preach this to the listeners also.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here. I love the Business Bites podcast, so this is such an honor.
Oh, well, thank you. Now, guys, she is a certified content strategist and the founder of Your Content Empire. She partners with small business owners who are ready to build their content empires, but in their way. Through her programs, agency, and award-winning tell-all blog, she has helped thousands of entrepreneurs create smarter content on a consistent basis that also delights them and their customers while growing their bottom lines. Haley, I think we are twins. I think I'm going to love this episode because I already love everything about this. Before we dig in, guys, don't forget you can find all of the show notes at rachelbrainke.com/EPI 105. I'm going to put all of Haley's stuff on there, her website. She's going to have a little fun stuff to go with this episode, and you can find all of her stuff. So Haley, I've given the bio, which is like the PR bio, right? That everyone kind of talks about. But I want to hear from you how you got into entrepreneurship and got to where you're at now.
Yeah, so I finished my master's in communications, and I went right away into a government job thinking that public service was my dream job. As it turns out, I loved what I was doing, but I hated the environment that I was doing it in. So while I really enjoyed communication strategy and marketing strategy, I prefer like breaking down those big high level things into like small sizes, which are perfect size for small businesses.
I love it. So if there was one thing you could tell yourself back when you first started, what would it be? What would you change in your business?
Treat your content like an asset. So Rachel, you kind of alluded to the fact that you might be sitting on mountains of content. So that's not the time to be creating a ton more unless you truly need it, but really make an effort right from the beginning and right from the get-go to catalog it and archive it and treat it with the respect that it deserves as such an important asset in your business.
So let's flesh out this cataloging and archiving. What does that tangibly look like in implementation?
Yeah. So for myself, and one of the things that I teach people is how to set up a content bank. So making sure that, we use something like Trello, you can do it in Asana, Airtable, it doesn't really matter where, just as long as you can categorize it and sort it. Something like Trello is great because you can also integrate it with either Dropbox or Google Drive. But literally every single piece of content that you create, all of your blog posts, your like juicy sales emails, all of your like videos and freebies, just so you can go back to that library instead of going back to the drawing board to create something on the exact same topic. So it avoids duplication of effort.
I love that. I'm scribbling notes, guys, because Maya's podcast assistant is going to tell me after she listens to this episode, we need to have a better content bank, because we've kind of taken and just linked podcast over here, blog over there, but we don't really have everything in one place that you can easily dig into. Man. All right. Let me finish scribbling that down, because now I've got mountains of work to do when we get off of here. So after you realize you have this content bank and you create the categories and you're able to sort through it all, what do you do with all that?
Yeah. So I think if you're in a place where you want to maybe take a bit of a break from the consistent content churn and get off that wheel of creating consistent content, because I preach consistent content, like you need to be staying top of mind with your audience, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it needs to be brand new content every time.
That's exhausting thinking about new content.
Totally, especially if you've been at it for 2 to 3 years, you have a lot of juicy topics and juicy content that you could be repurposing into new blog posts, or not necessarily new blog posts, but get it in front of people, right? Get it in front of people because your audience has a turnover as well. So likely your audience today hasn't seen your content from a year ago even.
Man, by the way, I just want to interject here to say, if you're listening to this and you're thinking, oh my gosh, I don't have content, well, that's probably where you need to start. You guys have heard me talk about on other episodes, whether you're a brick and mortar local location or you're online, content is king. You hear that all the time, but it's true because it helps to create the credibility, authority, and relationships with those that you want to buy into you. And I think even more so these days in this world of social media, you have to, like Haley said, you have to constantly be putting content out there. It doesn't necessarily have to be fresh content. But let me ask you this before we dig into more of how to kind of repurpose and dig into this existing content. How do you make the determination if should I go digging into this big mountain or should I create new? Because what if you see your audience having a specific question, but you don't have anything to meet their needs?
Yeah, well, that definitely means that you should create a new piece, right? If you see questions being asked, I think so. I see so many of my audience members like struggling with imposter syndrome and thinking that they have nothing useful or helpful to provide or say. And yet, if you can bring it back to being of service and simply finding questions, answering questions, rinse and repeat, by the end of doing that, you're going to end up with that content bank full of juicy topics.
And I know it's hard if you're sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, I don't need one more thing to do. But how I really even started blogging in my own journey is I was asked the same questions all the time, over and over, and creating a blog. And at the time we didn't have Instagram, or putting out a social media post on, it was MySpace or on Facebook. It was to be able to not have to repeat the same thing over and over. It was more of an efficiency thing than a connection thing, which has just evolved and brings us right back to this whole like repurposing of content, the forever funnel strategy. So tell us, what does that mean exactly?
Yeah. So this is a way I've been doing the strategy with like my agency clients since around 2016, but it's a great system to put into place for clients who happen to have a lot of content already. But if you are getting started, you can build this from the get-go. So it's basically a way of theming your content so that you are creating these sequences that bring people through a journey through your email service provider. So setting up these mini sequences that lead to an offer. So basically in practice, it looks looks like, say I want to sell my mastermind and it is about, I don't know, live video, how to do live video, whatever it is. And so taking at least like 5 to 6 blog posts related to that, structuring them in a way so they bring people through a journey, and then culminating in like a week to a week and a half of sales emails. Then you have a sequence that covers 6 weeks of time in your email service provider. And then you can stack another one and another one. And so by the end of doing that 9 times, you have a full year of content covered, and your content is essentially on autopilot, especially if you think about your content in terms of like internal and external. So internal would be that email service, email sequence that goes to your existing community. But externally, you can choose one of those posts per week to focus on publicly to promote and provide a theme for your outward facing communications and messaging.
What's funny is I was resistant to this forever funnel type strategy in the very beginning because I had it in my mind of my audience needs fresh content right now and I have to post it or email it rather every Tuesday at 10 a.m. or they're going to be disappointed. And I got to starting to realize, and this is the same thing of how social media works now, is everyone's going to come in at a different time. So if I'm posting week by week, wasting my time, and I say wasting because you inherently end up wasting time and energy on sending out a dated timed email that's not in like these funnels that we're talking about. If I start doing this January 1, only the people that were actually on my list January 1 are going to get everything, because those that come in July 10th are going to have missed like 7 months worth of content at this point. And by having a funnel, I can start the July people at the same first email that the January 1 people received. And it was when I finally realized that my audience didn't really care if it was a quote unquote brand new fresh email, that I could share the same email 1 month with someone and 1 month in another, it freed up so much of stress for me. And it brought down that wall of resistance to creating these funnels.
I think it just allows you to be so intentional with the journey you want to take people on. I think it also allows you to monetize your content a lot quicker and get offers in front of people far more regularly, which only helps to see a higher ROI from your content. I know that can be one of the biggest complaints, is it feels like this is taking up so much time and I don't know that the ROI is there. So this is a way of solving that issue.
Let me ask you this. We've been primarily saying email through all of this, and funnels typically are email driven. What is your opinion on the use of bots? And I don't know if there's a terminology for it, but like the way that Facebook ads work, where you can include and exclude people based on activity and show either ad 1, then they see ad 2, then they see ad 3, and it's kind of a funnel-ish. Do you think that email is still going to reign supreme?
I think like still email marketing is the most profitable marketing out there. I think it's also the most effective in terms of conversion rates compared to something like just website traffic or even like email, like per impressions, right? Because they're a warmer audience. Now, I think that bots and I think that retargeting ads, I think that's such a brilliant functionality, and they can really complement the efforts of your funnel, especially if you have an automated way like ActiveCampaign, which allows you to like put people in audience and take people out of audiences that you can do retargeting. I think that's just a way of getting your message in front of people on a like just in another way, right? You hear of effective frequency, where people need to see a message they used to say like 21 times before they're ready to take action. So now it's much more, right? With all the ads bombarding us. So I think of Facebook ads and I think of bots and I think of social media as just another means of getting it in front of them and not just relying on email.
Yeah, and I love how you said that Facebook ads, and you can insert any other ads in here, guys, and these bots and usage are supplemental. They're not primary. And Haley just touched on something that's a truly sophisticated way of approaching this. And you mentioned with ActiveCampaign, we use Klaviyo, and they do the same thing where you put one person in a funnel, you can attach a custom audience, and that will push to like Facebook or wherever else you're doing advertisements. And then it can feed them different ads, but it's supplemental. It's not so that you're turning around and putting $500 solely into a funnel in hopes it works. It's allowing for your audience member, your potential customer, getting the email, they're clicking on it. So it's triggering stuff because they're going into your blog. And then when they click over to Facebook to check out what gifts their friends have posted that day, they see a supplemental ad. I love that strategy.
Well, I think it comes down to the fact, like, as great as social media is and as great as paid advertising is, gosh, if I could go back to when leads were like $1 a lead, I'd put all my money there.
I know. Those were the days.
Those were the days, but you can't rely on that like in perpetuity. I wouldn't put all of my eggs in that basket. Whereas your email list is something that you own. And yes, there is like, it's a bit tumultuous. Like we see GDPR come in, we see like these new laws in California come in. But right, our email lists in general are something that we own and we can rely on versus who knows what's going to happen with the cost per conversions down the road.
Which, by the way, I'm going to link, if you're sitting here going, I have no idea what GDPR is or what California things Haley's referring to, I have episodes on both of those. So I'm going to link them in the show notes, rachelbrinke.com/EPI 105. That way you can just click over and listen, because if you are sold and bought into this whole thing that Haley's talking about, and I'm going to tell you what, my life and my stress got so much better and my stress reduced when I got into these funnels and flows. If you are going to be doing that, you need to understand the legal privacy concerns and the legal requirements. GDPR is for EU based, and the California obviously is California, but we're seeing it move amongst all the states. And guess what? If you're not living in either of those, but your email address or website's accessible to either of those locations, you still may be subjected to the legality. So make sure you click over, listen to those episodes, because I don't want us to dig into that here. I want to hear more about Haley's great information about utilizing this content. But yeah, just know you got to get those legalities. You guys know me. I'm not going to let that pass. So Haley, they're sold on this idea. I'm going to create these funnels so that everyone gets my content. I've categorized it into a bank, but how do I get from this categorized, neatly done bank that I've slaved over and done many hours? How do I fit that into this funnel? How do I determine which content needs to go into it? And how do I use it?
Yeah, this is where the fun part, at least for me, comes in, is where you get to start combing through that bank that you've created and start bundling topics and themes together based on the offer that you're leading up to. So for every content campaign, and you want them to be about 6 weeks long. So 5 weeks of value content where you're having weekly emails direct back to blog posts on your website. We want to be sending traffic to your website, not to something like Instagram or something like that. So 5 weeks of value content and then your sales emails. So for every single campaign, you'll go through the process of, number one, let me decide what it is that I'm promoting and selling at the end of this campaign. Number two, what are the blog posts that relate to this theme that I'm going to approach this offer from? So say, let's go back to our example of, say you're selling a course on live video, which I don't even do live video. So that's definitely not me. But, say your theme was like video confidence or something, and you could pull all of your blog posts to do with video confidence and being prepared and feeling prepared, right? And then so gather those in, you have those emails, you likely have some promotional copy already for those blog posts. So your emails are pretty much written there. And then you can add in the sales emails for your offer. Then you can go and automate it, set up your automation, and then think about your publicly facing thing too. So even though, Rachel, you said it right. Like someone joins in January and then they join in February, they're not going to get the same post unless there's an automation like this in place. But publicly facing, you can assign one blog post per week on your calendar to promote on all of your social media channels. So there is a theme there as well, even though someone is going to start with email 1, not email 5 with this strategy in place.
I love that. And what I find, my structure and approach is very similar. That when I start doing, like for example, you gave 6 weeks. If I start going through my blog posts and I'm like, I got to fit this into 6 weeks, I start realizing where there's holes in the content that I've put out. You're trying to walk them down this path. You're trying to hold your potential customer's hand. You're going email 1, email 2. I'll go, how the heck did we get from 2 to 5? We're missing like steps 3 and 4 in here. And it shows me, you're talking about this public facing blog posts and such, it's showing me what content in messaging is missing.
Yeah, that's a great way to think of it too, because chances are you are going to need to fill some holes, but using the strategy, it's going to at least point out what those holes are and what those topics should be.
Let me ask you this. It's easy for us to look at our own content and go, oh, it's so good. I'm going to stick it into 6 blog posts into 6 weeks with a call to action on email 6. When in the process do you encourage people to evaluate objectively by analytics or having someone else look at the flow? When should they, I guess what I'm trying to say is, at what point should I go to Google Analytics first and see which blog posts were the most interacted with? Or like, how do I determine that?
You could, but I think if you're having trouble deciding between 2, I would recommend doing that.
Okay.
But in most cases, your earlier posts haven't gotten as much traffic as the post you're creating now, just because your audience has grown, right? And so one of the things I have like 1 part courses in my business, 1 part agency. And in the agency, we build sales funnels for people. And what's really unique about our process is we have a testing protocol, which I think you could use in this case too. We do use this in this case too. So what we will do is we will actually divide a person's email list into quarters. We'll run a quarter through at a time so that we can go back and optimize the funnel. So we'll know right from there, for using this testing protocol for the forever funnel strategy, we'll be able to tell which posts were duds, right? Especially if there's an outlier there, or on the opposite spectrum, which ones were complete smash hits because the click-throughs and the open rates were a lot higher. Also gives us an opportunity to fix those things, right? Like add different call to actions or try a different subject line. And then by the end of that, you'll also know what your conversion rate is in terms of like how many people ended up purchasing this offer I was focused on for this particular content campaign in my forever funnel.
So one thing that we use internally for our e-commerce sites, we're WooCommerce sitting on WordPress, and we have it integrated with Klaviyo. So we don't have to sit there and do the math of this many purchases during this time, compared to the total amount of purchases. Some of those might have been outward facing. It directly tells me the amount that email value is.
That's so smart. Yeah. I use something called Funnelytics, where we can put codes into our clients' funnels, as well as our own, which kind of tracks that as well, and also lets you build out some projections. So there's so many great tools that is going to take out like the time consuming part of measuring this for you.
But I guess if there's somebody who's listening that is not using online e-commerce stuff like this, what can we recommend to them how to figure it out? I guess initially I think, well, if you have a call to action to have them inquire, you could have a specific inquiry landing page, that's specific to that email.
Yeah. Well, if you're a brick and mortar store, I think it's, you have that extra challenge of you don't necessarily know where your traffic is always coming from. But if you're online, you will be able to track this stuff manually by just looking at your open rates and your close rates. In addition, if you're brick and mortar and sending out email campaigns, you'll be able to track those as well. The conversion rate will be a little bit tricky unless you have a good habit of asking people, where did you hear about us? Or having your salespeople do that. So I think as much as possible, just thinking in terms of what was the reception of this particular blog post and or email, in terms of what was the open rate, what was the click rate, what was the traffic, where did that traffic come from, and then the conversion, right? Same thing. What was the open rate, the click rate, the purchase rate, and where did that traffic come from?
That was a lot. You guys, if you are someone that is not able to track it online, you need to pause and rewind a little bit and rewrite all that down. We're also going to have it in the transcript for you and notes. I want to ask you, Haley, there has been, a lot of people talk about email funnels and such, and they all have different recommendations. And I always hear conflicting advisement between put the whole blog post or content in your email and leave it at that, versus have an email that only has like an introduction and then link to like a blog post. Which would you recommend?
I am a personal fan of making the email different. I think that you want to, like, your email list should feel like your inner circle. And so they should feel like they're getting a little something extra from saying yes and being in your community. And so I always like to take the approach of like writing a behind the scenes or sharing a helpful resource or telling a story of what's going on that week, something that
Love it.
makes it feel a little bit more timely and a little bit more personal.
Love it. So you said for like, let's say the 6-week campaign example, it's 5 weeks of content and 1 week of call to action, which would be like, buy this, inquire to me. But in those 5 weeks before that last CTA email, do you have any sorts of CTAs like share this with a friend, forward this, reply to me with your embarrassing story or something?
Yeah, you could totally work that in. So working in more of those micro commitments, right, before you get to the purchase. I would save those for those value emails and not the sales emails. You don't want to have too many call to actions, especially when it comes to a sales email.
One of our best performing emails has been one, because I teach legality stuff. So we talk about like horror stories. And so the email goes out and it says, reply back and tell us your horror story. Well, I just did that thinking, well, let's see how many people read them. Our email, that's like our number one email that we get from our, in reply to any of our funnels, because people want to share their horror story that they've had with their own clients.
Oh, I love that. I love that example.
It's super cool. I just stumbled upon it. It wasn't some like mastermind strategy thing. I was like, I want to see what other people have for pain.
Yeah, I do something similar. I think, working with clients is that like one of the benefits of it. I always love that I don't just, probably the same thing with you. I love that I don't just teach a strategy that worked for me. No, we're in the agency rolling our sleeves up every single day, testing these new and latest strategies with our clients, and then able to bring the info into our content and the stories into our content, as well as share it with our students. And I think that just adds such a well-rounded experience, and you have those stories to share.
So let's circle or maybe cap this off with, you say evaluating the content and doing analytics, because we've done this content bank, categories and sorting, getting it into a funnel. You've given us the structure for the campaigns, but how do you evaluate really to see what's working and not? I mean, obviously it's easy when I see that a lot of people are responding to what's your biggest pain point email, but I mean, how can you tangibly track this, and when should you? I mean, you mentioned doing like quarters, but is that too long? How does someone decide what's best for them?
Oh, no. When I mention quarters, I mean when we're running the testing protocol for client, we divide their email list into quarters and run a quarter through at a time, or give a quarter a 2-week head start. I think you should be measuring. I think you should know the difference between your leading and your lagging metrics. So your leading metrics are the things that are going to determine the outcome of your goal. So say your goal, as most people, is with their funnels, right? Let's make more sales, or let's get more inquiries, or let's get more consult calls booked, wherever your point of sale is for your particular offer. So that becomes like the end goal of your funnel. Now, what are the leading metrics for that? Is it, the number of people reaching the sales page? Is it the number of people booking a consult call? So is it the number of personal outreaches that you need to make? So those ones you can be measuring on a weekly basis. So for instance, I run Facebook ads as well as promoted pins for my funnels. And so I want to know the number of leads that are coming in every single week so I can determine what my sales are going to be based on my conversion rate. Now, the conversion rate and the open rate and the click rate, I don't think you should measure that more than once a month, because you need to have enough time in there to let things level out, because you might just have a weird group in there that's super responsive, or a weird group in there who like don't open emails. So it kind of depends, like weekly for your really important leading metrics, and then monthly for those lagging metrics, those results and those smaller things that you want to be tweaking.
I love it. That is upping my anxiety of more things I need to do. But it's so important, because I think one of the traps that people fall into, and hopefully you guys have had your minds changed if this is how you came into this episode, of set it and forget it. Because I think some people who teach this quitting content creation funnel stuff, you never have to think about it again, but that's not true. I always think of it like a huge boulder, almost like Indiana Jones style, right? It takes a lot to get it going. You got to create the bank. You got to bundle the topics. You got to get them in the campaign. But once it's going, you still have to do little taps to keep it going. And for me, that would be like these analytics and reviewing and adjusting of things.
Totally. I have a lot of clients who the reason they want to do this Forever Funnel is because they want to switch to doing something else in their business, or they want to start up a micro business and have their content taken care of. But it is not set it or forget it. You have to constantly be coming back and measuring, but it can take a lot of time off your plate and allow you to have more time for the things that are important for you in your business and life.
I love it. So Haley, can you let them know, actually, before we get into where they can find you and all that, one last tip that you have relating to this quitting of content creation?
Set up your content bank as soon as possible, because then you're not going to need to go and find all those pieces. They'll all be right there for you.
And that's the most inundating portion, I think, especially if you've been doing this for 5, 10, 15 years, pointing at myself, and you don't have a solid content bank in the way that I think you are recommending to structure it. But it'll save a lot of time in the future.
Yeah, and I'll provide a link to a blog post, which I just put out about doing a content audit, and it's how to automate pulling some of that content for you so you don't need to like manually upload everything.
Yeah, I'm going to need that link ASAP. Well, Haley, thank you so much. Guys, don't forget, you can get all of the links and stuff to reach out to Haley at rachelbranke.com/EPI105. Also, jump into the Business Bites Facebook group where we're going to be talking about funnels, quitting this content creation, and you can be sharing some of your content bank stuff with the other listeners of the Business Bites.
Thanks for joining Rachel on this episode of the Business Bites. For show notes, a list of recommended tools, or referenced episodes, you can find them at businessbitespodcast.com. Until next time.